Frank Lopez is a Dallas-based photographer and educator specializing in 19th century techniques, all the while keeping current with 21st century technology. A professional with over 20 years of experience, Frank has endeavored to integrate historical techniques into the modern classroom, teaching non-silver, pinhole, and more recently tintypes and ambrotypes to his students. Frank is the photographic instructor at Green Hill School in Addison and built an international award-winning photographic program versed in 19th through 21st century photographic techniques. His students regularly work with the wet plate collodion process, one of only 3 schools to do so in the nation, and has had numerous students recognized in national and international contests. Frank also contributes to a cultural immersion program in the summers, helping to lead a group of Green Hill students on a photographic and spiritual journey in China and Korea. Recently, Frank was awarded the Dallas Observer Mastermind Award, recognizing significant contributions to the Dallas cultural community. Frank lives and teaches workshops at his Fair Park studio. His work is currently showing at the Latino Cultural Center as part of the Echo in Dallas exhibit, as well as the Sun to Moon Gallery as part of the North Texas Alternative Process Group show, exhibiting various alternative process techniques. Beginner's Monochrome Prints. Old Wagon Wheel. There is so much pattern and texture that my eye moves around too much, notwithstanding the spot color on the image. I think with spot color, it's something that's not very compelling for me. I kind of feel that if you have to highlight something with a specific color, then the subject matter should probably be more interesting. You filled the frame with your subject matter, and the rails of the wheel pull the eye into the image. The light is really harsh, and you probably need to not sharpen this so much. The image is not in focus. It appears that you took a very small digital image and tried to make it bigger, so everything is kind of mushy. Use a larger digital file to start. Work on those things. Improvement comes in small steps. 4 points. Tenor with arms stretched out. The light coming from behind is quite nice. While I love the aspect of looking up through the subject matter and the sun coming from behind, the tangency of the arm stretched out and touching the far right side is pulling my eye to that tension each and every time. Pull back and give us some space around the hand and give us a comfort zone within the photograph. You could probably crop a little bit off the top as well to keep it focused on the subject matter. You have a clogged printer head. There are a lot of vertical lines within the photograph. There is some solarization and digital artifacts we're playing with here that I think are taking away the elements of a good image and keeping it away from being a great image. Overall, I want to encourage you to continue to look at things from a different perspective. I like what you did with the light, but there's still some refinement that needs to be done. 7 points. Sitting down on the job. I love the printing style, but it doesn't quite connect with me. I really feel disconnected from the animal and feel like I'm viewing versus participating. I would like to see something a little more impactful, something more behind the scenes. I think you can tell more with less, and this feels like you played your entire hand at once. There is a lot of dead space here. There's a lot of black at the top, and on the right-hand side there's a lot of space to work with. If it's about the elephant within this environment, let's play with those lights and make it really about the elephant. I'm not a fan of glossy paper, but your tones are very nice and your print quality is very nice. I want more of the story here. I feel like you're merely an observer. I'd like to see a different aspect of the circus. 7 points. Mayflower Storm. There is a dramatic light here, which is interesting, but the over-sharpening and overuse of Photoshop filtration really takes away from the drama of the subject matter. I feel like this should feel more natural. As it is, it feels very manufactured. We need more foundation to the boats in the foreground. They really kind of sit there in space without giving us more of the sea along the bottom of the boats, so it feels as if we're constricting the boats here. Let the image speak for itself. You have the start of a compelling image here. You have the storm and the interesting shapes of the ships and the environment. Overuse of Photoshop really detracts from the natural quality of the photograph. Pull back and have some confidence in your imagery. 7 points. Artful bridge. I'd like to see more of the bridge to get more of a sense of the surroundings. I'd like to get a sense of the context of the art on the bridge. This view feels a little too confining for the subject. The print has a greenish cast. Watch out for that. Sometimes you have to add a bit of tone to your inks when you print as a result of different papers having a bit of color to them. The image is over-sharpened a little, so watch out for that. 7 points. Over the dam. This image needs a lot more contrast and just a touch of sharpening. I love the composition. I like the horizon line being along the top. It is sloping a little to the right-hand side, so be careful to make sure it's nice and sharp and crisp and level if you're going to use that horizon line. I realize that curvature may be the result of a wide-angle lens. I love the aspects of photographing the overflowing dam, but we run into some focus issues on the right-hand side. Overall, the print needs a little more pop, a little more kick to bring out the interesting aspects of the flowing water coming through the dam. 7 points. San Francisco de Assis Church by Michael Farnham. Nice light, good environment, good composition. This is a nice image. The aspects of light here are good, but the over-sharpening really takes away from the image. I like the use of shadow and the tree. You need more space along the sides of the subject in order to give us a comfort zone for viewing the photograph. Watch for overcutting on your mats. 9 points and honorable mention. Textures 2 by Richard Stern. I like the texture on the brick. The printing is quite nice, and the composition with the 1/3, 2/3 focusing rule placement. The middle of the building feels like it's leaning to the left and feels kind of wonky. Look for straighter lines within the composition. The top right-hand side could use a bit of burning, but there is detail within sconces. I like what's going on in the image, but there are small things that could make this a more compelling image. 10 points and 3rd place. Morning Dew by Anupama Palamraju. I like the dramatic light. There is a little dead space on the top right, but I really appreciate the level of focus and the tightness of the composition. As intimate as this image is, you can probably crop a little more off the top. The circle of the petal pulls the eye into the left corner of the frame to that dark corner, and I think cropping can make the image even stronger. I like the printing and the focus on the center of the petal. The dew is in focus and makes for a very nice image. 11 points and 2nd place. The King on His Throne by Susan Burciaga. I love the tightness, the closeness of the neutral background. Very nice light on the subject matter and good sharpness overall without being over-sharpened. Very clean composition. Printing is very nice. Contrast is very nice. There's some interesting artifacts on the rock. You might take the rock a little darker just to hide any technical issues you might have there. Overall, very nice image. 13 points and 1st place. Advanced Monochrome Prints. Reading Time by Susan Stageman. This is a nice image, but it lacks intimacy for me. It feels a little lonely, with the person isolated toward the back of the image. Perhaps that is your intention, but it's not really grabbing me in terms of a dramatic approach to the image. I like the subject, but I feel there is a little too much headroom here. I think if you crop off the top of the image and the pole on the right, you isolate the subject more and create more intimacy, which is really what I think you want here. You have a clogged printer head. Even though you're getting beautiful tones here, I can see vertical lines coming through the photograph. 9 points and honorable mention. South Haven, Michigan Lighthouse by Jerry Martin. I like the light, even though the light appears to be directly overhead. I like the environment. It's very crisp, very clean. Overall, I like the composition. However, I think the lighthouse feels very centered. If you move the lighthouse to the left and let the bridge draw the eye in, or even simply crop the left-hand side of the image to create a very vertical type image, that could improve the composition a bit. Nice printing, very clean and crisp with nice contrast and good details in the highlights. 11 points and 3rd place. Broken by Rachel Cook. The open narrative is quite compelling and is something I'd like to see a little more of. You have just that edge of focus in the background. I like the gesture, and the light is quite dramatic as well. The only significant issue I have with the composition is the tangent right across the woman's head. I love everything else about this image, and it reminds me of work by Nan Goldin and Eugene Richards. If you're not familiar with their work, you should really check it out. Larry Clark's book Tulsa is another book you should know. There is really a kind of dialogue you're having with the subject matter that's quite compelling. I might take the background just a little darker to isolate the person in the foreground a little bit more, but overall, very nice approach to the subject. 12 points and 2nd place. Wartime Photographer by Philip Johnson. I do like this a lot. I like the subtlety to the way the person is lit. He appears to be front-lit. I really like the use of space here, even with the highlights pulling the eye to the background. There's enough information in the foreground, the folds in the jacket, the look of discernment in the subject's eyes. Everything about the image is very nice and powerful. The print is very clean, and while this is staged and could become cliched, I feel the photographer pulled off a very nice image. 15 points and 1st place. Masters Monochrome Prints. Egret's Protective Cover by Paula Buzinius. Nice use of composition, light, and environment. I like the overall image. I like the closeness of the image and all the stuff in the background. The environment feels natural. I like that approach. It's a clean, nice shot. We probably could have a little more separation between the baby and the mom. Maybe just a little more contrast on the baby so it stands out a little more. Small tweaks. I like the darkness of the background and how it pulls the eye back into the mother bird. 10 points and honorable mention. Chapel View by David Forehand. The light is quite dramatic. That's very nice to see. Nice composition. It pulls the eye into the photograph. Good foundation for the falls. Very strong image. Beautiful printing. You're right on the edge with over-sharpening. I see a lot of over-sharpening in the background along the trees. If you need to, do that selectively using your history brush. Watch for the dodging around the steeple. I can almost see a halo, and while I like the dramatic effect, make it completely convincing for your viewers so they can't see the technique. I like the vignetting across the top. Overall, a very nice image. 13 points and 3rd place. Sheltered by Dennis Ritchie. I like the cultural aspect of this image and assume that this is somewhere in the American Southwest. I like the settlement and the way it's embracing the natural aspect of the landscape. I like having the natural aspect of the environment shown as a dominant part of the image. It pulls your eye back into the lower left-hand side. We need more burning on the right-hand side so that it pulls your eye into the photograph. Overall, this is a nice print, just some subtle things. Your corners are very important. Your corners will say everything about your image because they allow the eye to wander off or they draw you back into the image. 14 points and 2nd place. The Flight of Light by Bill Hayes. I really like what's going on with the positive and negative space. You filled the space with a dramatic shadow. The light coming through the picture and the backlight is quite nice. There is a little bit of lens flare in the top left-hand side, so watch out for that and shield the lens. Working in studio, there should be time to take care of those small things. The overall print color could be a little more neutral. You're almost getting a dark green or turquoise in the deep shadows. Sometimes you need to warm up the print just a touch to compensate for the print color of the paper itself. 14 points and 1st place. The Monochrome Judges' Choice Award goes to Broken by Rachel Cook. I love the open narrative of the photograph and I think it was well executed. Studying socio-documentary and even some surreal photographers will give you some ideas for continuing to shoot in this vein. Beginner's Color Prints. Rope. I like the fact that the image is close, but nothing is really in focus. The texture of the rope is interesting, but it's hard for me to see what the image is really about. It needs a stronger element. The image is green overall and needs color correction to become a stronger image. 4 points. Main lighthouse. The lighthouse is very centered. The eye goes straight to the lighthouse and then stops with the sides filled by the bay. It feels very static. Try balancing the image by having the jetty moving the eye in from either the left or the right. Things put right in the middle of a photograph tend to stop the eye. I like the placement of the horizon line, but you need to straighten it as it's a little crooked. It's all about balance. The image is overly sharpened. This feels like a small image that has been enlarged too much. The light is very harsh. This feels like midday sun, and that's the worst kind of light to use. Get up early or photograph late in the day to get better light. 5 points. Barbed wire and roses. Is it about the rose, the structure in the background, the relationship between the rose and the background? I don't think so. The reason I don't think so is that the background doesn't necessarily balance the rose. The rose is just kind of floating there. We need to work a little more on composition and intent. What is the image about? The image is a little cyan, so the color is a little dirty. The rose petals are pink, but they could be cleaner. Work with a color wheel and color correction filters. A good trick for everyone to neutralize your eyes when working on a computer screen is to sit back, blink a lot, and get up and walk away frequently. Also, use a gray card to look at to bring your eyes back to neutral. Many colors can look a lot alike. You'll be able to see color a lot more cleanly. 5 points. Art in the garden. This image feels very static. When you go into an art installation like this and you find elements like this, you need to commit to one thing. This composition doesn't feel harmonious with the environment. The image feels a little oversaturated and the light appears to be very bright. Get closer, make the photo more intimate. There is a lot of interesting stuff going on, but the image as is doesn't necessarily transmit that. 6 points. Checking out. The airplane feels very static because the sides are so tight. Pull back and give us more room around the airplane. It feels like it's floating rather than flying. Crop off the top and bottom and give more room on the sides, then it will feel like it's soaring through the air. The color needs to be cleaned up a bit. I know this is a very difficult subject to shoot. These planes are moving very fast, so good effort. 7 points. Minding the coffee shop at the Austin Street shelter. I do wonder if you approached the individual you photographed to make sure he was okay with it. I feel this is very important, to be mindful and respectful of the dignity of those being counted among the homeless. I commend you for going in and working in environments like this one. There are stories to be told. We need to illuminate those stories and put a face on homelessness. The image is green overall, so add more magenta within levels or curves in Photoshop to help clean that up. Keep working at it. You're moving in the right direction. 7 points. Sunrise at the ranch. The fence pulls the eye right in. You have the light coming through, the fog or mist, the tree balances on the left. The composition is beautiful. Technically, there are some problems. The image is over-sharpened, it's out of focus, and there are many digital artifacts. This appears to be a smaller image that has been overly enlarged. You have all the elements of an incredible image here. 8 points. Autumn Aspens by Michael Farnham. Nice autumnal image. I love the environment. I like the use of light. It's nice and diffused, beautiful skies. Your eye moves in with the aspens moving from right to left. Good horizon line here. Feels a little oversaturated and over-sharpened and a little out of focus. You need to watch that critical focus. There's a little truck in the far left corner. You're working in digital here. I'd get rid of the truck, although it's fine to leave the road in. 9 points and honorable mention. Chihuly Underwater Reflections by Jackie Carver. I really love the inventiveness of the composition here. You're working into several elements of reflections, highlights, shadows, and sharpness. There's really some cool stuff going on. The majority of the image is balanced and it feels nice and tight. You just need to go a little darker in the shadow areas, a little more contrast as well. I don't want to see the rocks and the highlight of the sky. That looks good. If you could just take the shadow areas and make them pop out a little more and warm up the green a little bit, it will be a much stronger image. 11 points and 3rd place. One-eyed, one-horned, flying purple people eater. Susan Burciaga. I like the use of space and environment around the flower. Maybe cropping off a little on the right to center the flower a little more. I feel this is one of those subjects that can be centered. The focus isn't purely sharp, but I still like this image. 11 points and 2nd place. Tulip by Richard Stern. I really like this a lot. The tight crop and repetitive color and pattern. There's beautiful stuff going on here. The color and light are wonderful. The tight focus on the flower is great, and I love the background being out of focus. The color is spot on. It's really hard for me to say anything more that needs to happen here. This image is what good photography is about. Beautiful image. Good job. 15 points and first place. Advanced color prints. Morgan by Rachel Cook. I like your subject being offset, but it's almost a little too much. I like the cropping at the top of her head. I think a third of the image to the far left could come in, starting with the red bricks. The image appears a little red, and adding some cyan would clean up the skin tone and really get into the strength of the image, which is her eyes. 10 points and honorable mention. My Nut by Jessica Gluck. I like the closeness of this image. It has a certain humor to it. Nice sharp detail in the eyes, clean, smooth print. I appreciate the skill of the photographer for pulling off a nice tight photograph. Good composition, 10 points, and third place. Morning Light by J. Hoppenstein. I like the balance between the meadow, the horizon, the mountain, the tree on the right. I like the light. Your eye moves straight in. I like the road on the right instead of down the middle where many people might have placed it. I like the fence post on the left creating its own vanishing line right in the middle, and yet it doesn't feel static at all. It's just a nice image. This is slightly unsharp, and whether that was intentional or not, I'm not sure, but it would benefit from being sharper. The light, though, is lovely. 10 points and second place. Child of India by Janie Rumberger. I like the closeness of the image. It almost has an iPhone, Polaroid, Instagram feel to it, yet it has an intimacy to it. I like the sense of emotion coming through the photograph. I like the heavy grain. Some people think that's a bad thing, especially in this age of digital, but I like grain and grew up with it and think it can be a beautiful thing. Nice, tight, close, intimate photograph. 13 points and first place. Masters Color Prints. Grand View at Sunset by Dennis Fritchie. I love this composition. Nice, sharp, crisp focus. The pastel colors are interesting, but the background colors are oversaturated. That yellow could be pulled down. The tree in the foreground and the sky are gorgeous. Use your history brush to selectively desaturate that yellow and red in the background to really pull together a very powerful image. 12 points and honorable mention. Ridgeline by Suzanne Graham. Very nice image, and I love the use of the horizon line. Maybe bring down the top just a touch to accentuate the clouds even more. They almost look like smoke. When shooting landscapes like this in the mountains, you run into a lot of cyan reflected down onto the range. I think you could get the color on this a little more neutral by toning down the cyan. 12 points and third place. Death Valley by Steve Newman. Very striking in the way we look off into the horizon line, showing the very different beauty of this natural area. Slightly out of focus and fuzzy, A little more sharpness, especially in the foreground, would improve this very, very good image. 13 points and second place. Garlic by Frank Richards. I love the closeness and stillness of the image, the texture. I love the grittiness of the photograph. There is an elegance to having the three elements, yet each one has its own personality. The light is very romantic. Beautiful still life. Watch for overcutting on your mats. 14 points and first place. The Judge's Choice Award for Color Prints goes to Garlic by Frank Richards.